Joe! Joe の野郎。鬼姫が完全にぶっ潰しやがって。
Oh my god. Hello everyone, welcome to Joe Consumes Cinema. I'm your host, Dangpei's Confession, and today we have Ashita no Joe, episode 21. So, great reveal last episode, Dangpei confessed what he was doing, how he was sort of stringing Oyama along in order to train Joe, apologized to Oyama, said, I think you have a lot of potential as a natural defensive fighter, and that's kind of the style I've been training you in anyway, but it was more just to bring about Joe's need to finally recognize the need for defense, to actually incorporate that into his fighting style. And he's right. A purely offensive fighter eventually will run into a brick wall, and then, they don't have that sound defensive base to stand on, and they just get picked apart and destroyed. I just really like how, we're finally all back together, Dangpei and Joe working together. Joe now knows that, this was all just a part of his plan. He wasn't abandoned, and, all that history with his parents, none of that stuff has to really come back to the surface anymore. Like, it's okay. Everybody's like working as a team again. And I really think where this is headed is ultimately Dangpei is going to open up a gym with, Joe as his star pupil, but some other characters along the way I could see, becoming boxers in their own right. Oyama's definitely one of them. Maybe Nishi. He's sort of like still very much in the background for the most part, but we haven't seen him fight. So, maybe we'll even see him fight this episode, but I feel like he's been training and he's been, a little bit more stern with Joe, a little more give and take, kind of like standing up for himself. So I think that's because he's been training boxing. But yeah, honestly, I just want to get right to this one because we should be getting that fight between Rikishi and Joe, the rematch, pretty soon, either this episode or, one right after it. Kind of depends how much they want to string this along. They could go right for the throat and we could, start this episode with the two fighting. But yeah, only way to find out is just to find out. So yeah, I want to get right to it. But before we begin, as always, remember to blank, blank, and blank. Still very much a small channel, so every like, comment, share, subscribe that we can get really helps out. Really appreciate it. Patreon link down below. With that, let's get right to it. Sando baguni kao mega ke tatake 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 ashite waきっと明日はどっちだ。
この写真はジョー兄貴がさ、青山くんをまさに京王線とするところでありまして。
て、何が名カメラマンだい。見ろよあの写真。
全部ピンボケばかりじゃねえか。
たまに写ってるかと思ったら誰かのケツとか。
This is what I like to see. A small fight with a big honor.
Joe, 昨日青山君との試合があったばかりだ。いくらお前でも相当なダメージを受けてるはずだ。力石君との試合までにはまだ何日もある。今日の練習はこの辺までにしとく。
たかこれくらいヘッドも持っちゃいねえ俺様だぐらい承知のはずだぜ。
とにかくちょっくら挨拶してくるか。
力士えらく張り切ってるじゃねえか。張り切りたくもなろうぜ。1週間後にお前との試合が控えてるとあれやな。そいつが会いに行くとダメになったのさ。
What? Is he getting out?
ある事情でな。なんだと？そんなバカな。ある事情ってなんだい？なんだっていいじゃねえか、そんなこと。だから俺はたった今勝負をつけようと思ってな。
Okay. He doesn't have Dangpei in his corner. This is so unfair. Joe's been working out for like hours here. Now he has to fight?
やる気があるのかねえのか。すっきりしろい。そんな引きつったな声でわめくなよしやがれみっともねえ。この俺がさ、やる気がねえとでも思ってんのかい、東園僕。これそんなところで何をやっちゃうか。
Oh shit.
油 乱するとこうなるんだい。
ほら、やめんか。
そんな騒ぐ暇があったらカウントでも取るんだな、教官先生。
ああ、どついた。今、矢吹私をどついたね。
どついたわけじゃねえ。ちょっと押しただけだい。いちいちわめくない。
教官侮辱隊で反省棒へ叩き込んでやるから。
うるせえ。この勝負が終わったらどこへでも入ってやろう。
Now he really hit him.
収容リングへ行って続きをやろう。
先生、喧嘩です。収容生が大勢で大乱闘やってますね。
何？俺たちが教官の目を引きつけとりゃ、リキーさんもゆっくり上料理できるってもんだ。
Oh. So I'm guessing Rikishi is getting paroled, and he doesn't want to get in trouble, so that's why he's, doing this. He still wants to fight Joe and, not just leave it.
今みたいにお前をぶっ倒してもカウントを取るやつがいねえんじゃ全く張り合いがねえぜ。
第一どうせ KO で肩をつけるんだから採点も必要ねえ。相当なダメージは回復したし、奴を怒らせることもできた。何にしてもどんな手を使っても。
He finally woke up.
あの二人は
He's fucking cracking him. He's mixing it up really nice now. Body in the head.
あんなパンチ力を身につけたのか。
力石君、あなたはあとたった3日でこの少年院を出られるのよ。ここで何か問題を起こしたらまた出張延期されるわ。
3日後
Don't get distracted.
たった3日さ、これで分かったろ。1週間も試合を待てねえ理由がよ。
やい、逃げるかい貴様。
冗談言うな。逃げねえからこそこうやってやろう。
This is really impressive. Joe is still, very injured from his last fight.
だが少年院の草犬と野郎を相手に引き分けの星を残したままとあっては大変な恥ですからね。やろう。やめ
Don't get wild.
やめるんだ二人とも。話すけどさ、落ち着くか。白木幹之助氏の講演のもとに出所を直ちにプロボクサーとしてカムバックするって話は聞いておるがな。実はこのジョーも少年院を出た後はすぐにもジムを開き、わしのコーチのもとにボクサーとしての第一歩を踏み出すことになっておる。この勝負は何もこんな雨の降るオンボロリングで決着をつけんと、シャバに移してやり合うがいいじゃないか。プロ剣闘界の広いリングの上で思いっきりだ。プロのリングか。気安く言ってるがどうかね、段平さんよ。問題はあんたさ。あんたはボクシング界で悪い評判を残しているな。俺が6回戦ボーイ時代、あんたの悪評を随分と耳にしたぜ。
What stories?
今のあんたは日本のボクシング界からつまはじきされてる身だ。
お黙りなさい。あなたいつからそんなおしゃべりになったの？
おっちゃんよ、力石が言ってたこと、あれはどういう意味だ？
力石め捨て台詞に昔話をほじくり出しやがって。あれから何年経ったと思ってるんで、くだらねえ。
Oh my god.
ジョー、そいつは
バレちゃあしょうがねえや。
なんだってそんな真似したんだ。どういうつもりだ一体。
今日はあの野郎には絶対負けられねえと思ったからよ。
しかしだな。
ああ、誤解しねえでくれよおっさん。俺は普段ならあの野郎には勝つ自信はあるんだぞ。こっちはヘトヘトに疲れてるんだ。まともにぶつかっちゃ不利だと思ったのよ。
不利だと思ったら 明日にでも明後日にでも試合を伸ばしゃよかったじゃねえか。
そうはいかね
どんな手を使っても勝つという根性。見どころがあるぜお前。バカ野郎。
Yeah, not happy with him.
二度とこんな汚え真似をしてみやがれ。この石ころでな、貴様の脳天を叩き割ってやるぞ。この少年院を出るまでにな、おめえにはな、明日のための15までをみっちり叩き込むつもりなんだ。
He's only on 7, I think.
ぐずぐずするな、来い。
Ashitaを目指して立つんだジョー。Okay, I took some time just to gather my thoughts, and it was episode 21. Excellent episode. So I talked about it right before that we might just, flat out get the fight between Joe and Rikishi, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So episode starts off with, a sight that made me feel really good to see. Dangpei and Joe, training. Joe working the heavy bag, looking pretty good despite the fact that, he just got done his fight with Oyama. Took a bunch of damage, but, he's got a high spirit if nothing else, so he was still going. Dangpei got distracted because Miss Shiraki showed up in that helicopter again. He went to go say hello. Rikishi had just been waiting for the opportunity to get Joe alone so he could actually just start the fight. He said Sunday wouldn't work for him anymore, and I thought, okay, is he getting out of jail? Like, what other reason could there be? Like, it's way too important to him for, him not to actually fight Joe. Even the fact that, he's still injured and tired from his fight with Oyama, he's going into that fight with a disadvantage. He still wanted to fight him. He couldn't say no to it. They start fighting right there in the field. Guard shows up and, tries to break it up. Joe knocks him down, basically puts him out with like a kick or whatever. He eventually wakes up and then, tries to tell everybody else to come out and help him to break up the fight. They take it to the boxing ring. It starts raining. Initially, Rikishi is doing quite well, but eventually Joe, finds his pacing and his rhythm and starts giving it back to Rikishi as much as he's given it to him. And he starts doing real damage to him to the point where, Rikishi is really getting hurt. And he's surprised, how am I letting this punk do this to me, Joe starts getting the upper hand, the crowd forms around them. Even Dangpei starts giving out instructions, put your back into it. And Joe beats him to his knees. And that's when Miss Shiraki reveals that you can't be doing this. You're almost out in 3 days. Just, don't mess it up. You have a lot to do, once you actually get out. Really pursue an actual pro boxing career with her grandfather's help. This distracts Joe, learning that he's getting out in the next 3 days. Rikishi gets back up and, starts beating him up. He falls to the ground. But, even after that, Joe still gets up, starts piecing Rikishi up, and it's getting to the point where Rikishi's about to lose. Dangpei jumps in and, splits them up. Upon learning the news that he's about to get out in the next 3 days, he doesn't want him to ruin his opportunity and just be stuck here forever. So Dangpei comes up with this alternative, instead of fighting here in the rain in this, dingy little ring, what about actually fighting as pros at a future date? In, a real arena, with everyone being able to see it, and, all the prestige and honor and, all that stuff that comes with it. Because honestly, I wanted to see the fight between Rikishi and Joe, but not under these terms. I don't want Rikishi to get in trouble and have to be, stuck in jail. I don't want Joe to have to fight when he's not 100%. It just, these two need to be, fully trained and prepared and, in good shape and all that for it actually to, really mean something. So the fight gets broken up, and Rikishi says something interesting about Dangpei and his past, how he blames him. Apparently, Dangpei has a pretty bad reputation among, the boxing aficionados. He may have even been banned from boxing for, I don't even know. They didn't really get into it, just sort of hinted at it a little bit. But Dangpei was stunned about it. Joe asked about it, said, it's pretty low for Rikishi to bring, up his past that's so long and buried at this point. But Dangpei and Joe are talking about it, and yeah, Dangpei's plan is to open up a gym once Joe gets out and, start really training him the right way and, guiding him throughout his, eventual career as a pro. Joe reveals that he was holding rocks when he was fighting Rikishi, and it was like, he's doing really well for a guy that should be physically exhausted. All his punches are landing. He's doing a lot of damage. And yeah, he was cheating. He was holding rocks to give him a little bit extra power and pop in his punches. Dangpei is fucking furious with him. He understands, the rationale of, Joe having been so recently beaten up pretty bad, not being able to say no to Rikishi, and he wanted to make up for that disadvantage, so he decided to do this, which really low, and Dangpei is furious with him, literally hits him and knocks him on his ass. But yeah, this reminds me a lot of Hajime no Ippo, where Ippo starts off as, the rookie in the boxing gym, Miyata, fresh rising star. The two end up sparring. Ippo gets properly trained for the rematch and ends up, defeating Miyata. Miyata then splits from the boxing gym to go his own way, and they've been just teasing that, rivalry and the rematch ever since, hints at it here and there. But that's kind of like the overarching big fight that everyone is looking forward to. And that's very much, this rematch between Rikishi and Joe. So, yeah, similar setup. It happens a lot in the boxing world where, fighters get into these trilogies and even quadrilogies. Good competitive fighters, match up well against one another, and, sometimes they go back and forth. Sometimes a guy holds an edge even 3 fights and ends up losing the 4th fight, like it sometimes happens. So yeah, this is a classic boxing rivalry, and, you see it in a bunch of different media in the boxing world itself, so it makes total sense. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I look forward to the next one, and I'm going to get to that right now. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and peace.